Hi guys! This term in history we're looking at the First Fleet, which is really interesting to learn about. When we look back on history topics though, there are parts that we find a bit disturbing because in history they didn't have the wonderful living conditions that we have. They lived in poor, terrible conditions. I don't want you to dwell on it too much. This is what happens when we research history topics. In 100 years' time, when they're researching the history that we are living right now, they probably can't believe that we drove around in cars with four wheels when they're, in flying cars. So don't get caught up in it too much. We are just researching and looking at what happened in the history that has resulted in the life that we're living now. The Life in 18th Century Britain worksheets really look at images to help us understand what they were going through. So we need to have a read of this comic and we need to add the dialogue that we think the characters might be saying or thinking. The bottom box gives us a bit of a clue about what's happening. So already we can see sad faces, happy face. By the mid-1700s, farming was changing in a big way. New tools, fertilizers and ways of farming meant that fewer workers were needed. So we can already see this is probably the farmer is happy. He doesn't have to pay these guys to work for them anymore. They're sad because they don't have a job. So these workers moved to the cities to look for work. Soon the cities became overcrowded. So something they could be thinking about is, we don't know where we're going to live. We need to find a job. This city is definitely not as nice as the farm. So we need to write that in that box. Many poor people lived in terrible conditions. Work was hard to find and many people were starving and suffering from disease or illness. These people could be thinking that they're starving, they're hungry, they want somewhere to stay, they want a comfy bed. Some people turned to crime. So by crime, it's these people who are absolutely desperate for food, who can't afford it because they don't have a job, and they're trying to find whatever way they can to find food. Whenever I see something like this, I actually think of the Disney movie Aladdin, where Aladdin was really poor and he stole bread to try to have something for him and Abu to eat. So maybe think about that movie when you're thinking about how desperate they were for food and what they would do for the food. To try and stop all this crime, more and more rules were made and tougher punishments were handed out. So the judges had to make lots of rules to deal with all the new crimes that were happening because people were getting inventive of how they were going to find food. Fill in those dialogue boxes. Over on the next page, we need to have a look at this picture. And I have to admit, this picture makes me sad, but we have to remember that was their life back then. Being sad about it can't change it. We just need to be appreciative of what we have. Look at this drawing of a poor family in London in the 1700s. Imagine you were in the picture. What can you see, hear, and feel? So I can see from the picture darkness, not much furniture, not much space. They've got a whole family of 5 there living in one room with a bed. What can you hear? Maybe you can hear your tummy grumbling. Maybe you can hear busy streets outside. Maybe people are fighting in the streets because they're looking for food. What can you feel? Hungry, cold, sad. I imagine if you're not eating much food, you probably feel really tired as well because you don't have that energy. During the 1700s, there were a lot of petty crimes being carried out, like stealing wood, pickpocketing, and sheep stealing. Why do you think this was happening? I think we've talked about it a little bit enough that you should be able to answer that question by yourself. Research what these unfamiliar but real criminal terms from the 1700s mean. I'm going to be really honest with you. I had not heard of any of these criminal terms before looking at this topic. So, type them into your computer and see if you can find an answer. A lot of these terms were introduced during this time because of all the crime that was happening, and they needed to find a way to punish the people who were doing the wrong thing. And just remember, as sad as it is looking at those pictures and imagining yourself in that situation, the reason that we're looking at it is because we need to have a better understanding of why the First Fleet was coming to Australia. Good luck.